Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Alter Your Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter. This is your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet. Collectively, we're on this healing path together. And together, I do believe that we can support the planet in healing herself as well. My name is Benjamin Alter. I'm the host of this podcast. This is episode number 108, which means there have been 107 additional episodes to this podcast. That is just astronomical. I didn't know that this was going to last this long, but I'm feeling it. And I'm actually feeling like I'm catching a second wind, if you will, with regard to this podcast. And hopefully I can have your support as well. And if it's your first time stopping through, feel free to hit the subscribe, rate, and review this episode. That's like 5 stars, and then leave some comments, leave some feedback. And if you're really up for it, if you know somebody in your life, a loved one who would resonate and feel connected with this sort of information and inspiration, go ahead and send it off to them like a little love bomb, because that's what this episode is all about. Dropping love bombs at a distance. Whew. Our guest, he's a special guy, and I feel grateful to have him on the show this week. Unfortunately, I did not connect with him in person when he was coming through Carbondale on a little workshop tour just a few weeks ago. But we did connect via Instagram and set this up. So thank you for taking the time, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg. If you don't know Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, he is a guru. I'm just kidding. Maybe he is. We didn't talk about being a guru, but he has a lot of wisdom to share, and he shares it, most importantly, from a real, deep, genuine place. So Dr. Jeremy Goldberg is making kindness cool, and he's making the world better today than it was yesterday. And I do believe with the help of people like Dr. Jeremy, the world will be better tomorrow than it is today. And hopefully this podcast will really facilitate that waking up process of the world that we're all a part of. We really are. And so Dr. Jeremy, he worked for governments and universities for over a decade. He's an expert in human behavior and spent 5 years studying how our brains influence our actions and wrote a PhD thesis about that. Pretty cool. He is a ferocious optimist who desperately wants you to shine your light brightly, and he supports people in doing that through his private coaching. His podcast, the Long Distance Love Bombs podcast that he hosts, he gives talks and workshops, of course, and he also writes books. We didn't talk too much about books. I know that he wrote one book. It's called It'll Be Okay and You Will Be Okay Too. I think that was released just last year. I don't know what else he has written in terms of books goes, but I can trust that he will be writing more in his life to share his message from that deep place that he does. So I have blabbered enough, but just another reminder to hop on this bandwagon towards health and healing individually and collectively. Subscribe, rate, review this podcast. Take a breath, relax, and enjoy these love bombs with our guest, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg. All right, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, welcome to the Alter Your Health podcast party.
Thank you, man. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited.
Some streamers.
Bring your own streamers to the party. Yeah. We almost connected in person. You were on a little road trip tour, doing retreats and workshops and that sort of thing. And you came through Carbondale, and it was so funny because I don't really scroll the Instagram stories of people or things, but I was on the Insta stories for True Nature, which is the local kind of awesome yoga venue, and that's where you hosted a workshop. And I was like, and there was a workshop from this guy, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, and it had your face, and I was like, I know that face. And then I went to your profile and I was like, I know that guy. And then I sent you a DM and I'm like, do I know you? And you're like, no. And I'm just like,
Oh yeah,
okay.
right.
Maybe not. I don't, now that we're connecting, I don't think I've met you, but anyways, I think it just speaks to your personability and the way that you're just kind of a authentic, genuine human being that anyone can connect with and feel like, oh, I know this guy.
Yeah.
So, hey.
And it's sort of like a running joke with my family because probably without exaggeration, once a month, I'll have this same interaction with people whereby they say, we've met before, or you look familiar, or you remind me of someone. And I have to tell them very humbly and politely, like, no, it's not me. Like once this man was convinced that he and I had smoked cigarettes at a bar the night before. And I'm like, honestly, man, that was not me. So I don't know what it is. I think I just have one of those kind of faces that looks familiar to people or
Yeah.
something. But well, we've connected now, and that's fun.
We've connected and it's fun so far. We're off to a good start. I also, maybe not once a month, but on some sort of regularity, people are like, are you so and so? So and so's cousin? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, so I don't know you. I kind of have followed you for only, I guess, a month or 6 weeks or whatever, and have already felt really kind of touched and inspired by the work that you have been doing for, I guess, making kindness cool since 2010. That's at the bottom of your website. So you're not new kid on the block with your mission and your vision. But I'd love to just maybe start by learning a little bit more about how you've come into this world of spreading compassion and kindness, where it started. And
Yeah.
I did watch your TED Talk, which kind of speaks to it, but maybe you could encapsulate that for the listeners.
Sure, sure. So yeah, it's been like a slow grind at this project that I started called Long Distance Love Bombs. And that's kind of my online headquarters, longdistancelovebombs.com, and on Instagram as well. And so that in itself began as kind of a distraction from my PhD thesis. Back when I was a university student in Australia, my previous life, I was working on the Great Barrier Reef, and I was working internationally as a coral reef ecologist, coral reef manager, managing projects and people. I lived in the South Pacific, I lived in Thailand, and then I was in Northeast Australia studying human behavior, basically trying to understand why we do the things that we do from an environmental and conservation context. So trying to save the Great Barrier Reef, basically. And so I was reading all about psychology and sociology and marketing and communication science and all this kind of stuff. And on the side, I started this long distance love bombs thing where I was writing articles online, and I started an Instagram account, and I started just sharing little uplifting notes and messages, basically on the internet. But it began, sort of the origin story was this moment in an airport many years ago when I looked over and I saw this woman who was sitting alone, and she was on the telephone and she was sobbing and she was just crying a lot. And I kind of stood there for a moment watching her, and then she hung up and she put down the phone, and she just kind of continued to sit there crying. And I looked around, and she was kind of inside of this sea of people, right? Like waiting at the gate, people everywhere, but she was just alone and isolated. And I felt really terrible for her. And I wanted to do something, and I didn't know what that could be. And so I got a business card out, and I wrote on the back of it, "It'll be okay. It'll be okay, and you will be too." And I walked over and I handed her the card, and I gave her a little pat on the back, and we made eye contact. And then I turned around and walked away. And I was just terrified in that moment. Like, oh my God, this woman thinks that I'm hitting on her, giving her my phone number or something. And like, what is she going to think of me? This is crazy. But so I turned around, I walked away, and then I boarded my flight, and I've never heard from her. I don't know what happened, but it got me thinking a lot on the airplane about the society that we live in, the culture that we create every day. And I just felt like in that moment, we could do better. Like it felt crazy to me that a woman could sit and cry by herself and be surrounded by people on telephone screens and magazines, just kind of ignoring her. And I started thinking about, what if kindness was cool? Like, what if compassion was popular? What if we could just, it was normal to see these kind of circumstances and move towards them and offer her a hug, or to talk about it, or to sing her a song or whatever, so that so that we don't have this idea that it's okay to be lonely and isolated in the world. And so that kind of was the origin story. And then I started writing little notes on business cards, and I wrote thousands of those, and I left them around town. I left them underneath windshield wipers and like at restaurants and in the library, and just everywhere I went, I would just leave these little notes that were encouraging and inspiring, just trying to remind people that it's okay and that life gets better and that they are enough. And I just think there's real power in words, and you just never know what any individual is going through on any given day. Yeah.
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 Beautiful. I'm curious, when was that moment in the airport? And then what was the process like to cultivate and develop this kind of, brand, if you will, around making kindness cool?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of fuzzy in my memory now, but my recollection. So I already had the brand and like the blog, and
Oh, you did?
yeah, but that was for an entirely like that was a different story. So I had a
Different
blog.
sort of love, different sort of
Yeah,
bombs.
just yeah, man. I've been traveling the world, being very nomadic and backpacking, and I had a blog um, where I was writing travel stories, just letting my family know that like I'm alive, and uh, and so I'd put those all together into a book, and I had called the book like Long Distance Love Bombs, and about travel and adventure and whatnot. And I've done nothing with that. It's still on my hard drive. But so at the time, like I had a website and I had a business card because I was trying to like get readers for this book that I had written that no one
That
has
you
ever.
had the one that's on the hard drive that hasn't really been
Yes.
into the
Yeah.
world.
Literally just 200 pages that have never been shared with the world, which is crazy to me still. But so I wrote that thing and then I had business cards and then sort of took this pivot, this sort of hard right turn away from being a little travel writer, blogger person, and got really excited about the possibility of creating positive impact in the world. Um, and so I kind of and it fit. So I called these little notes that I was leaving everywhere love bombs, and that's basically what they are. These little surprising little explosions of encouragement or affection, and it just kind of snowballed. I started leaving those notes, and then I started like making art and prints and magnets and selling those at local markets. And then I started a Facebook page, and then I started an Instagram account, and then writing articles online. And then I put out a book, and I gave a TED talk, and I host workshops. And it's just kind of slowly over
Yeah.
many years of like daily devotion and dedication. This little side project hobby has now become like my career. I just opened like a formal LLC. Like I started a business called Long Distance Love Bomb, which is just the craziest thing to me to think that that's my reality now. But you just never know. Like you just never know where your life is going to unfold. And
Yeah. I love how you really, because I think a lot of people go out and start a business from their head and
mm-hmm,
like, oh, I'm going to do this and put up this and do the work to get here.
mm-hmm,
But you just have been going with the authentic feeling. And it's really just, for lack of a better phrase, taking on a life of its own. And you're just in the ride with it.
totally, man.
That's
Absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah, and I think there was real power in the way that it was formed because I didn't need it at all. Like it literally began as just this kind of distraction that was fun that helped me escape my cubicle life working for the government in Australia. And so
Hmm.
it just felt fun and it felt entertaining and it felt easy and it brought me joy. And at the time, like I was getting paid to be a scientist and I had that whole separate world going on and so because of that, like I didn't need off it, for example. Like I didn't need followers, I didn't need anything. It was just a pure enjoyable experience for me. And
Yeah.
that consequently, like as the PhD process advanced year after year and became less fulfilling, harder, more boring, uh, difficult. It turns out doing a PhD is like really hard. Like,
Oh,
like,
well, I didn't, yeah, who would have thought?
like who would have thought? But like, it turns out, yeah, it's challenging. And the more that that was happening, the more that I was kind of having my head turned towards this long distance love bombs project, which was fun and free and easy. And at that time, I was starting to get a little bit of a following and getting really nice messages from strangers, and I was connecting with other writers and poets online and making friendships, and it just felt so good. And then eventually I sort of reached this crossroads in my life where it was like, okay, are you going to continue being this scientist that you've been for the last, decade, and that you've spent 5 years like grinding out this PhD thesis? Or are you going to be essentially an artist that works on the internet, and talks about vulnerability and truth and self-expression, and somehow make money from that? Uh, and so I was sort of facing this distinct choice in life that comes up for us every now and again. And I decided to take a road trip and avoid the decision. So I bought this old, terrible, not terrible, I bought this old van that we nicknamed Rusty because it was very rusty. And
And is that the current van that you just,
no,
no, that's,
this is the new one is Vanny. So Vanny is an
okay.
upgrade on Rusty. But so yeah, I drove around for about 2 months with my ex-girlfriend and went to national parks and camping and just like filled my cup back up, because at the end of my thesis I was very burnt out and tired and just empty, like at a soul level. I needed to do something different. So I did that, filled my cup back up, and then was like, okay, game on. I'm gonna do this long distance love bombs thing and just see how it goes. And I had a little bit of money saved up, and so then one day I was just like, I made a post and I was like, hey, I'm a life coach. Does anybody want to work with me? and and bless their hearts, I think like a handful of people that had been following me for a while said, yeah, I'll pay you money to talk to you, which is essentially all that coaching is. And suddenly I had some clients and some income that was enough to like that get me that first nudge forward of like, hey, this might be possible. And I continue to just chase that bliss and follow my heart. And it's been a wild ride, Benjamin.
Yeah, what a fairy tale. I hate
Yeah,
fairy tale kind of stories. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah,
But yeah, I don't hate it. I'm just kidding.
yeah,
I love the reaffirming and the remembrance that when we do follow our bliss, it's all good. Like we're not going to be led astray. And I love those kind of stories where you're kind of just, for lack of a better term, going against the rational thing to do. And like maybe the rational thing, oh, I got a PhD, I'm going to pursue this career in X and field, blah, blah, blah.
mm-hmm.
But the feeling was guiding you into the bombs, the love bombs.
Exactly. That's a
Yeah.
really good way to summarize that. And so I even had my PhD supervisor literally saying to me, out of a place of love and support, like, how are you going to make money? You need to make money.
Yeah.
And, dealing with family and friends and all of the expectations from society and culture. Like, wait, you just got your PhD. You're going to go and live in a van and just do a road trip? Like, what are you doing? Like,
Well,
genuine concern, right? And I totally get that. And
yeah.
and I understand where they're coming from. But for me, the idea of going back into the cubicle and writing more scientific papers and writing grants and all of the things that you have to do to be a scientist was just not what I wanted to do anymore. And like I wrote this line a while back that hearts change their minds, right? And our dreams change as well. And that's totally okay. But it's also very confronting in the moment to recognize that you want to live a completely different life than the one that you're living and the one that you have been striving to live for many years. And that's pretty terrifying, to admit that to yourself. And then it's also pretty terrifying to accept it and take ownership of that and decide to move to a different place, to decide to take different actions, to live in different ways. That's terrifying. And it's terrifying because you have to leave the comfort and the normality and the security of the life that you've been living and creating for many years. And you have to do that while at the same time consciously deciding to step towards uncertainty and the unknown and do something you've never done before. And that's also terrifying. So it's like a fear sandwich is the way I describe it. Is like you're stuck between like leaving the comfortable, safe, secure past and stepping towards the terrifying, uncertain future. And you have to, in my experience at least, there is no other way to live your dream than to be brave enough to start again, I guess.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, fun fact, I also lived in a van after I completed my doctorate in naturopathic medicine.
Awesome.
But I wasn't so nomadic. We had just got a van and converted it into a little camper tiny home thing, and
yeah,
it just worked out kind of financially, and I had a place to park it in the Bay Area. So
oh, perfect.
But I did have these thoughts that were like, what the hell am I doing? Like, shouldn't I be following like what these people think I should be doing or looking like? And I think we're all faced with that to some degree.
100%. And it's about recognizing what you truly want versus what you think you should want, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, whose voice even is that in my brain telling me that I should take the government job, that I should start the family, that I should have all that debt, that I should own the home? And it's very difficult because, at least for me, at that age, I was about 30 or so. Many of my friends were successful by society standards in that they were buying homes, they were having kids, they were owning cars, they were stable, they had money to play with, going on holidays. And I kind of blew that up for myself and walked away from that government job, walked away from that potential stability, because I knew deep down that I could live that life, that I would be a competent scientist. Like, I'm a good scientist. I could do the job, but it's not what I'm here to do on this planet. Like, it's not my special thing, or whatever you want to describe it as. Like, it's not my dharma. I think that's the right word. Is that the right word? You're like the spirit.
I think dharma means like work or duty or something, like action. No, karma is action.
One of those. Whoever is fluent in woo-woo can message us, but whatever it is, please, like, that wasn't my jam. Like, it was my jam for my past until that point. That was my jam. Like, that was all I knew. That was the route, right? And then suddenly the route transformed into a crossroads, and it was like, oh dang, like, I have an option here. There's this other path to potentially tread. And what's that poem? Like, I took the path.
No, you're the poet.
Oh, what the hell is it?
Oh, you're on the spot. I'm not going to help you out here. Good luck.
That has made all the difference. I chose the two roads diverged in a yellow wood. I took the road less traveled. That's it.
The road less, of course.
I think it's Robert Frost.
Of course.
It's like, I took, for me, the road less traveled meant go live in a van, go start an online business, go become a life coach, go get a book deal, go start a podcast, like, go do your own workshops all around the country. Like, that to me is the road less traveled. And it still is. I'm still doing projects and facing challenges that I've never faced before.
Despite the fact that there are a bajillion podcasts and a bajillion life coasts and a bajillion workshops, like, what's your experience in that? Because obviously you're unique and have unique gifts and skills and perspective to share from. But do you ever consider, like, this road less traveled is very well traveled still?
Totally. Yeah. And like, I would just say that we all individually have special skills, experiences, ideas, etc. And so the way that I look at it is like, yeah, there's, I don't even know, millions of podcasts, but there's only one that does it in the way that I do, right? And there's millions of writers out there, but nobody has my voice.
So
Like,
what I hear you saying, or what I hear you sharing from, is the level of confidence that you've cultivated. You've got a level of security in who you are and your gifts and skills that you can share. Would you agree?
yes, on some days. And yes,
Yeah.
overall, like that's a foundational belief that I have cultivated through time. Yes. And like Macklemore has this great line that nobody ever in the world could ever take my job or something like that. Like he is the business. Like he's a rapper, he's a writer, he's a creator. Like nobody can take his job. They can try and do it the way that he can, but nobody can ever do it in the way that he can. In that same regard, now because I've been writing for many years, like I have a distinctive voice, a writing voice, in the way that I communicate in my articles, in my captions, etc., and even in the way now that I think, the way that I think, for example, the way that I communicate on my podcast, in the same way that you do as well, in the way that you host your podcast and the work that you do. Like we just develop an authentic presence, an authenticity, that when communicated over time is like, again, it's like a snowball. You know, I've been doing this for 5 or 7, I don't even know how many years of just posting work online. And when I was starting on Instagram, I was posting every day. Like that was my intention. It's like every day I'm going to write something and post it on Instagram. And I look back at some of that work and it's like kind of terrible from my perspective now. But at the time, it was the best that I could do. And I was really proud of it and still am in many ways. But I have evolved a lot since those kind of early days, let's call them. And now I'm like, yeah, people unfollow me every single day. People don't like my stuff that I write every single day. And like, I just don't give a shit anymore. Like I like one of my New Year's resolutions years ago was to attract more haters. Like that was
Wow.
like that was my goal.
Tell me more about where that comes from or what
Yeah.
inspired that goal. That's unique.
Yeah, because I was realizing that I was fearful of being unfollowed or not liked because I was still in this place where I believed that external validation was required. Like I didn't love myself and my work enough that I'm having a hard time communicating this. Um, I was relying on external validation to justify my place in the world and the work that I was producing.
It's like you were looking for a good test to test
Yeah,
the
so
stability.
I was still like just starting, was like, oh no, Susie Q146 on Instagram left me a mean comment. Oh no, that means I am not good at this and I'm destined to fail and this will never work out and blah blah blah. Right. And and so my way to deal with that, at least um somewhat jokingly, but honestly, like I meant this. It's like I want more haters. And the reason I did that was I sort of flipped the narrative of like, if I'm seeking haters and I get them, then I've succeeded, right? Whereas if I don't want the haters and they arrive, then I've somehow failed, whatever that means, even though failure doesn't even exist, right? The other aspect is that haters are like a badge of honor, right? Because we only hate the things that matter.
Hmm.
And we only hate the things that matter to us. We don't hate things that don't make us feel things. We don't hate people that have 12 followers on Instagram that wrote a little note. We just are like, we only hate the things that matter. And if I could make people feel something, whether that's good or bad or otherwise, whatever, if I could just make them feel something to get to a place where they were like hating my work, then I felt like I was making an impact in the world. And
Yeah, I can appreciate that. It's like you were seeking impact, and whether the impact was like quote positive or quote negative, it doesn't really matter. There's still impact, something that leaves a mark.
yeah, like I wanted to get Brene Brown or Teddy Roosevelt, that line of like, I wanted to be in the arena. Like I wanted arrows in my back. Like I wanted to really go all in on this writing thing, that go all in on this sharing my truth thing. I wanted like to be amongst it. And so for me, that was like a sort of a challenge that I gave myself as a New Year's resolution of like, really don't hold back this
Yeah.
year. Like, like say what you want to say. Like use
Yeah.
profanity if you want to use profanity.
Yeah.
Don't sugarcoat your message. Don't try to write for the masses. Don't try to please everybody because you'll never please everybody because freaking Beethoven has haters and God has haters. And no matter how good you are, people are going to hate you. And that's totally fine. And so that was part of my process for coming to terms with that and like deciding to just be myself. Whoever wants to come on the bus and party with me, and like, that's cool. If you want to get off the bus, that's also cool because you're just creating space for more people to get on the bus. And like, I'm going to do it my way.
Hmm.
And I'm just going to trust and have faith that that's going to work out for me.
Man, well, I did not pay you for this life coaching session, but I'm receiving extreme value because you're speaking to exactly where I have been recently. You know, I come and go, but from this space, but I have been resisting haters
Yeah.
to put it simply. And I think there's part of me that really knows exactly what you're talking about. Like, you know, being authentic, being in the arena, playing the game, being hated is inevitable and it's part of it. But
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really embraced that. So thanks for showing me what it looks like and feels like. And I'm curious, you know, based on that New Year's resolution or whatever, what was the year that followed? What was your experience in that with that resolution set?
Yeah, it's interesting because I then realized that much of my work focuses around kindness, compassion, love, like trying to help people live better lives. It's very like, if you go to my Instagram, it's very like inspiring, helpful, playful. And so what I found was that by trying to um, by trying to be 100% myself, like volume all the way up, what it did was it was more polarizing,
Yeah,
right? And so what I mean is that it was creating maybe more haters, but at the same time, like a magnet, it was also attracting people who loved me even more. And
yeah,
so because I was cranking the volume up on who I really was deep down, and my writing voice, for example, and like really just going for it. Um, yes, some people left me and I was too much for them, or they didn't appreciate the profanity and they kind of hated what I had to say. That happened. But the unexpected surprise was that on the other side of that spectrum, I had all these other people who were like, became like proper fans, like really loved what I was putting out in the world and
mm-hmm.
really vibed with the language and were just like even more on board with what I was saying. And so I think that is like kind of a secret sauce, so to speak, of trying to differentiate yourself in this world in which there are a million podcasts and a million writers. Whatever we said previously is like, if you're being yourself and you're kind of polarizing to the extent that you're so authentic that people know what they're getting, then it's a positive and a negative. Like you get the love, but you also get the hate
Yeah.
in quotes, right?
Yeah, right. Now,
Yeah.
I do appreciate that. I think that the term polarization has a negative connotation. It's like we don't want polarization, yet it's really important. You know,
Yeah.
I think, right? Because you know, for example, I I wrote something on Facebook the other day and just kind of a provoking question to people, and it did just that. It was provocative.
Mm.
And one of the comments was like, this is polarizing at its best or something. And I'm just like, okay, like, is that bad? Like, I don't know, you know, but it was definitely the comment carried a lot of
Yeah.
emotion with it. So, but you're kind of changing the perspective through which you're seeing polarization and just seeing it as like this battery of kind of reality.
Yeah. I mean, I get that nowadays especially in the US and from like a political context, that society is very polarized now into these like Republican Democratic camps. And I think this
Yeah.
idea of polarization has got a lot of attention recently because it keeps people apart on one context. And that's like not ideal, right? And I
Yeah.
think part of the problem from that context is that we're no longer even trying to understand the other side. We're not even open to new ideas. We're not open to changing our minds. We're not open to that compassion required to understand another person's viewpoint. It's just like we're firmly entrenched in these two camps that are throwing things at each other. And like that's just dumb, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially someone who's been advocating compassion and kindness. I think like, it's interesting to advocate compassion and kindness from your perspective of seeking haters, So
Yeah.
it is like it is I really feel it and can understand it, but it does seem like it's like how can you be compassionate and kind while also attracting haters or like being okay,
Yeah.
But
Well, it's the same
yeah.
way, I guess, from an artistic perspective, which is the realm that I'm kind of grouping myself in. Um, if I am compassionately communicating truth as I know it to be now, right? And I'm doing that in a way that feels fun and good for me with the intention of trying to inform and educate and inspire, right? And people hate that, then that has nothing to do with me.
Right.
Like how people respond to the work that you put out into the world has nothing to do with you. On a broader context, like in a small bit it does, right? If you're putting out crazy stuff, but in the projections that come from online comments or the feelings that are evoked from questions that you post on Facebook or Instagram captions or art or music, right? There's that great line, I think it's Banksy, but art is supposed to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. And so that's the polarizing lens that I'm looking at creativity from, of like
Yeah.
comfort the disturbed, give them a hug, let them know they're cool. And if they're comfortable, if they've built this bubble or this shell around their belief systems, around the way they view the world, then we need to shake that up. And just that's how we can try to get people a little bit more open-minded.
Yeah, that while they might be a little irritated or, they might be haters,
Yeah,
they are opening up and it is in service of them kind of evolving spiritually, for lack of a better kind of term.
totally. And like,
Yeah.
I guess just to also clarify, the haters for me are like the people who are just in a lot of pain and I feel for them and I send them love and compassion. But the ones who are like,
Uh-oh.
oh,
You're back.
okay, I went away from it.
You just had a little seizure.
Yeah.
An
Um,
absence seizure.
oh dear. You can cut that out or just leave it in, whatever.
No, it was beautiful.
Thanks.
Beautiful silence. I mean, we all appreciate that. But
Yeah.
I don't
Where
know
did I get cut
exactly.
off?
You were talking about haters, and I don't know.
Yeah. But it's like the point is like people who hate things on the internet and who voice that hatred in a really mean, cruel way. These people are in a lot of pain,
Right.
right? Like think how difficult it must be to log onto a website and to read something from a stranger and to feel so much pain that you try to communicate that pain through your comments and criticize and bring other people down so that you can feel better about yourself. Like that's the root of these like online haters or trolls or whatever. They're suffering. Like they need a fucking hug more than anything, right? And so my response primarily to like the admittedly few comments like that I get is I just write I love you. Like that's it. And that's just my way of being like
Yeah.
thank you. Like I'm not gonna get into this, but like I love you. I'm sorry that you're suffering. I wish you well.
Yeah,
And
I think that's beautiful. I
it's
mean,
all
I
we can
think
do.
that diffuses the bomb to some degree, right? Like some people might be like, "Oh, this asshole like loves me. What an asshole." But then it's like it doesn't really go anywhere from that, right?
Yeah, and imagine the pain that a person must be in to get upset that someone says I love you.
Right. Right.
Right. Is
Yeah.
like that's the root of it. And there's a lot of people in pain in the world right now. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that are suffering quietly and desperately. And I think that's why it's so important to do the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, the work that countless others are doing to try to inform and shift things at a radical, large scale perspective to like make this world a little bit more livable, a little bit more kind, a little bit more compassionate, so that we can all like enjoy our lives a little bit more.
For sure. I'd like to go back a little bit to like, actually a lot of bit, to like the airport scenario when you give the girl a note and that kind of sparked this compassion project.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I say and do and give and share things that I really need myself. And the act of sharing and giving love and giving hugs is really filling up me. Do you, in that experience, did you have that thought or feeling, or was it like, oh man, I really need a little bit of love, I'm going to give that to this, young woman here? Or what has your experience been with the giving love and the receiving love, and how has that opened up for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the moment, I wasn't necessarily analyzing it too much. It
Yeah.
was, it was like, oh God, that poor lady, like that sucks. And I just felt badly for her. But upon later reflection, I realized that like I've been that person in the airport. And like my airport may have been a school or a conversation or a car or a random office building, but like I've been that person who has been destroyed by life in a very specific way on a very specific day, and felt alone and isolated and just totally distraught. And I guess maybe that's one of the roots of compassion, is being able to see yourself in somebody else's life. Um, but I've found in the years to follow that like I try to write the things that I want to read. Similar to what you just alluded to, is I try to share the lessons that I wish I didn't have to learn the hard way. Right? Like I
Mm.
wish 10 years ago or when I was in college that there was an Instagram account that was like, hey bro, this is how relationships work. Like, hey bro, this is how to communicate with women. This is how your brain works. This is how your belief system functions. Like I would have loved that information. And instead I went out into the world and drank a lot and struggled a lot and got broken time and time again so that I could learn these really beautiful truths. And I guess for me and my motivation, it's about trying to share those things in a way that I find entertaining or informative. Like in the voice that I speak in is the voice that like I would be connected to, right? And so in that way, like Deepak Chopra or Tony Robbins or all these huge thought leaders, Oprah, whoever, like they might not be my person. Like in the same way that I don't really love Mozart or Beethoven. Like they're just not my messenger, right? But other people who I do adore and follow and connect with, those are my messengers. And so if I can speak my truth in my voice out into the ether of the internet, and I do that consistently through time, and I'm helpful or I'm entertaining or I'm, I don't know, fun, useful, then theoretically that snowball will continue to build. And so that's kind of my approach. But all of that is grounded in like trying to create a positive impact in the world with kindness and compassion, and like just chasing my bliss in my heart and being like, well, this feels fun, I need to do this. Or like, wow, that made me laugh, I like this, I'm going to share this.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like you're very, like I said, I've only been kind of following you for a couple months maybe now, but it seems like you're a very fun, spontaneous human being who's always looking for the good and the bright in any situation. So, it leads me to wonder, knowing that human beings aren't just, sunshine and butterflies, like how does Jeremy kind of deal with struggle now, given his experience, given where he's at and his understanding of human nature? What does it look like for Jeremy to be in a tough situation?
Oh man, like it looks just like you would imagine anybody being in a tough situation. Like make no mistake, like I get super frustrated, I get angry, or I experience anger. Like I am stressed about things. I'm not like some kind of superhuman freaking warm and fuzzy machine. And the way that I have found over the years to deal with that is to focus on focus on the things that like feel good and healthy and positive for me, like as a whole. So for example, morning rituals of moving my body, stretching, meditating, like eating high quality food, getting outside in nature, writing, doing more of the things that I love. I find that these things create a foundation to at least give me the best chance to have the best life on any given day.
Hmm.
And then on the events when unexpected things arise, or just life happens, or I'm doing difficult things that annoy me, I now have done this enough to realize that, like, hang on, I'm feeling this thing. So this idea of like getting in touch with what's happening in your body, like that might be take 3 deep breaths and be like name the thing that you are experiencing. Of like, okay, I feel rage. Like I use that as an example. Like I feel super duper fucking angry. Like that's okay. So that the second part is like being aware of it, accepting it, like, okay, yeah, I feel this thing. Like that's cool. That's happening. Right. And then not piling judgment and shame and guilt on that feeling. Is like, it's just a feeling. I get to choose how to respond to that feeling. Right. And so then the last part is like, how do I want to respond to this feeling? So I could go and pick a fight with the girl I'm dating. That seems unproductive and stupid, having tried that technique many times. Okay, what if I go for a run? Like, what if I just do push-ups until my arms break? What if I take a cold shower? What if I call a friend and just say, hey man, I just need to vent for 10 minutes? Or if I go for a hike in nature. And so for me, the process has been understanding what's happening, getting to the root of it, and then choosing the healthiest way to respond to that, and to like minimize the time that I spend in a suffering state.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So just
What
kind
about
of,
you? Like, what do you do?
I mean, that's a great question. I think it happens in any moment. You know, sometimes I throw a rock through the window. You know, like, sometimes that's the best thing I know. That hasn't happened in quite a
Yeah.
while for the listeners out there. But sometimes, like the expression of rage or frustration in an angry way that is destructive is like the best I know how to do in any moment. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really resonate with kind of the second point of the less we can stack judgment on it and the less we can call it wrong or bad, the more graceful we're going to be able to flow through that momentary experience. So that's kind of coming to be my key, is just not calling it wrong or bad, or, you know, just
Yeah.
understanding my tendencies, understanding patterns, and just having a little bit of a compassionate and lighthearted perspective on it. And I've been toying around with the idea of inflating it to such a ridiculous proportion that it just is silly, and just like making a joke out of something, you know, just like seeing the humor in things, that like a little thing that frustrates you, like, oh my gosh, there's a thorn on the rose bush that pricks me, and fucking rose bush, like what the hell is that bush doing?
My life is
And
so hard.
yeah, and just like seeing the humor and like, is it really like a problem? You know, just, you know, changing perspective, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I find that's a huge one, but that one often is easier for me after I've like passed over the bump of
Well,
the feeling.
it's all easier after you pass
Yeah,
over the bump.
yeah, of that. So, but you touched on a really powerful point that I think not enough people appreciate, which is like trying to cultivate that lack of judgment for however you're feeling at any given time. So,
Yeah.
like to continue that example, you're feeling anger, right? And so you're feeling this anger. And then we decide, hang on, I'm going to judge myself and tell myself I should not be feeling this thing, right? So now we feel the anger, and we also feel guilt and shame for feeling the thing. And then sometimes if we're really clever, we'll then judge ourselves for judging ourselves.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
oh my God, I shouldn't judge myself. Like, oh, and then suddenly you have like it's like an ice
Well,
cream of just,
yeah, you used the term like fear sandwich before, but this is like a not a sandwich, but like an open-faced, like mile-high sub.
just like of shit of just, it's like a shit Sunday. I hope we can cuss on this, but it's like a shit Sunday. You're like, oh great, I feel anger, I'm going to judge that anger as bad. That's like, here's an extra scoop of shit. And you're like, oh, and not only is that anger bad, I'm going to judge myself for feeling that way, so here's an extra scoop of it.
A different flavor of shit,
Different
and then this
flavors.
flavor of shit,
Yeah, and we do this
and then
so
hot
quick.
fudge shit.
Hot fudge, and we do this so quickly that like we feel the anger, and then like in a second we could have judgment, shame,
Yeah.
guilt, annoyance, whatever. And all of that does not help to reduce or deal with the anger at all. Like, it does nothing for the actual anger. You're just feeling anger. Like, that's the truth. And so then you get to choose however you want to respond to that. And so I think a really important concept is just like, feel your feelings, and like be okay feeling sad, scared, or angry, and like feel them. And just like that, it's like Pema Chodron of like, our feelings are just like clouds passing in the sky, and that you're the whole sky, right? Like, it'll pass, but you have to feel it. And then we also do this other really clever thing, which is equally unhealthy, in my opinion, which is like, bottle it up. Like, no, I'm not feeling anger. I'm just going to bottle that up and keep that inside. And I'll like squeeze it down real tight, and I'll store it down here in my lung or my like stomach or whatever. And like, don't ever express it. And then eventually something happens. Like, you're driving on the freeway and someone cuts you off, and suddenly it all comes out. Like,
Yeah, it is an interesting strategy of dealing with shit, putting it in a bottle and swallowing it and pretending like it doesn't exist.
yeah, I mean, I did that for years. Like, I was really, really good at that, because going back to my kind of familial systems, it was like, that's what we did. Just like,
Yeah, it's
talk about that. I
pretty
wasn't,
societally acceptable. Yeah.
yeah, no one in school was like, hey, class, today we're going to talk about how to express your emotions in a healthy, productive way. They're like, we don't have that class. We have,
Not yet. Yeah. Maybe
hey,
Dr. Jeremy is going to come in and teach that one.
but like, more and more what's happening is people are going to the internet and to thought leaders and to coaches and online workshops to learn how to be in a relationship, how to get your shit done, how to express yourself, all of these actual lessons in being a human that our school systems don't provide. And now I'm on a definite rant, but like, we're taught how to memorize words. We're taught how to calculate the angle of a triangle. And like, we're not taught how to freaking communicate our feelings to other people. We're not taught how to love. We're not taught how to be vulnerable. Any of this stuff. And this is all the secret sauce to being an awesome human, to having an awesome
So
life.
true.
You
So
know
true.
this. I'm preaching to the converted.
I mean, I'm being taught in this moment. But you are, as your followers and listeners know, you were like the king of tangential podcasting. So I'm glad that we finally wove in one of those.
I was trying my best to be really diligent and on point, but it was bottling up. I can only be focused for so long before I have to rant about shit Sundays and
yeah. Well, thanks for letting your bottled up shit Sundays come to fruition here.
But it's
And
so true. Like, we know this. Like, everybody listening is like, yeah, this makes sense. You're right. I think.
Well,
if
yeah, I mean, sometimes when I'm, confronted with something that's like what we're talking about, these kind of universal principles, it's just like, duh,
yeah,
I have this profound feeling of duh.
yeah,
And a lot of people, I look around and a lot of people are like, their minds are blown or whatever. And I've, rarely experienced my mind blown, because I feel like I have a little bit of a connection with all of the universal principles. I think we all do. We just totally forget or become, have this illusion of being disconnected from the truth. But when we are guided by thought leaders and Dr. Jeremy and other people towards these universal principles, we can remember, and those kind of synaptic connections to our universal authentic selves can be reestablished. And it's like, we're plugged in and it feels good.
exactly, man. And I think that's it. Like, we're all chasing that vibe. for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
We all just want to feel good. We're all animals. Like we want more good and we want less bad. Like
Yeah.
the end.
The
And
end.
we're all chasing that in our own ways.
Yeah.
And there are certain ways, I believe, that are healthier, easier, more sustainable than others.
And I'd love to end kind of with, on that note, with a final question. Sometimes I like to ask people, and it seems very fitting for this moment. If you could encapsulate, something, a practice or a belief or something that you could then slip into the water supply and force everybody to consume this magic ingredient to happiness and health, what would that magic ingredient be?
I mean, if I could bottle it up, it would be self-love and the associated self-acceptance that goes with that. I think like that in a water supply would be pretty revolutionary. And I think that's what a lot of people are trying to bottle up and sell in beer cans and food and marketing and clothing, all fashion, all of it. But I think in terms of like a practical, pragmatic thing that people can do, I'm very much firmly embedded on the meditation bandwagon now. I often say that if I could go back in time 10 years to when I was, 15 or in high school and tell myself to start doing one thing immediately daily, for me, like meditation has been a game changer. And it's the oddest thing to admit that publicly because for so many years, like I mocked people that meditated. I was just like, oh yeah, cool. Just sit with your eyes closed. Like that'll be helpful. Good one, you loser. Uh, but for me, it's been like, it's like a workout it's like a gym for your brain. And for me, it's one of the best ways that I've found to cultivate that awareness and acceptance process that I think is crucial to getting in touch with who you really are, with what you're really feeling and what you really want. And meditation doesn't have to be like sitting on a purple cushion with the incense flowing through the air. Like it might be surfing. It might mean snowboarding. It might mean working in the garden or going for a walk, or like whatever helps you just be totally present and aware, I think is a really positive thing. And that
Beautiful.
stillness as well. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. What would be your one? What would you slip into the water?
Well, I mean, it's got to come from self-love. If only we could, find the secret molecule of self-love.
Mm,
Oh man, that would be revolutionary. And I do appreciate the meditation message. And I think that like starting with the self-love is the most important part. I think a lot of people, sit down on their purple cushion with their incense because they're judging themselves and they want to be different.
yeah.
So it's like, as long as we're engaging in our spiritual practice or our gardening or our surfing from a place of self-acceptance and self-love,
Yeah.
then that's like the magic ticket. Yeah.
I agree, man. And I often get this from people. It's like, well, how do you love yourself? Like, what is self-love? And like the easiest way that I think that I understand it is exactly what you just said, which is self-acceptance. And from that place
Yeah.
of self-acceptance, it's just like, this is who I am. This
Yeah.
is what my life is like. And until you radically accept your surroundings and what's happening inside your brain, until you radically accept personal responsibility for what your life is, then it's going to be very, very challenging for you to change anything.
Yeah. I'll just add, because it came surging into my awareness, the Rumi of your task is not to seek for love, but to seek all of the barriers you've built against it, or something
Mm,
along those lines,
mm,
which speaks to the nature of, we are love. And it's our path is not to be more loving or to be more self-loving, but simply be more aware of our true nature.
yeah. Exactly. And like an example of that is like getting still, thinking, journaling, and recognizing, oh shit, like I push people away from close relationships because I'm scared of being hurt. like, oh, that's a big subconscious wall, right? And when you understand that, when you work through it, when you heal that wound, that wall comes down, and suddenly you have those good relationships, that close connection, those vulnerable conversations with people, and you have what feels like more love in your life, right?
Yeah, it's natural. It's there.
It's there. That's
It's
the
there.
grand paradox, right? Is like you have everything that you need, and everything that you chase is not going to help you get more of what you need.
Yeah. Well, maybe on that note, we better not continue
This is a
chasing.
rabbit hole, Benjamin.
Yeah.
We're on the path.
We're on the path. I think we need to recognize we're on the path and we're doing good, and a little self-love pat on the back, love bomb to keep us going.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all fucking awesome, and we're all trying to do the best that we can.
Yeah.
There's nothing
So,
wrong with that.
Yeah. So for people to learn more about Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, obviously you've already said it, longdistancelovebombs.com and on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And your book, when did you publish your book?
My book came out like in September last year, 2018.
Okay. Cool. So it's relatively new.
Yeah, it's pretty new. And that's like a collection of various writings and rants from Instagram.
Yeah, it'll all be okay, and you will be okay too.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah, it's the same as that word.
The notes that was on the card in the airport, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's all come full circle, which is so weird to me that if you would have stopped me in that moment and been like, hey, bro, guess what? One day you're going to have a book and it's going to be called exactly what you just wrote on that card and gave to that random stranger. I would be like, that's insane. That's literally impossible.
I'm not going to do that.
You're a crazy human, right? But life just works in the wildest, weirdest ways. So yeah, I've got the book, I've got the podcast, Long Distance Love Bombs podcast. And yeah, I do online coaching, one-on-one and group coaching. I do retreats. I've got a retreat coming up in England. It's a meditation retreat, actually, with a friend of mine. And then New Year's Eve, I'm doing a retreat in Costa Rica with Traver Bohm and Leela Dilla. That's like 6 days in the jungle. And
awesome.
Yeah, all is well.
Good stuff. Well, plug into Dr. Jeremy Goldberg and go be cool with him.
Yeah, come hang.
Yeah. Well, I've definitely appreciated hanging for this hour. And like I said, a few points in our conversation, it was like, oh, I didn't even pay for this.
I'll send you an invoice, man.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg. Peace and love. And until next time.
Yeah. Thank you, brother.